Hello everyone, and I am here today for a review of A Cold Legacy by Meghan Shepard. It is the third and final book of the Madman's Daughter series. I have done book reviews for the first two books, The Madman's Daughter and Her Dark Curiosity, so those should also be linked down below in the About section if you want a more in-depth review of what I thought about those two books as well. So I'm also going to be perfectly honest, I have loved this book series and I still do. I think it's so unique and something so different from what I usually, not that I usually read, but it's just so gothic and twisted and beautiful writing in the sense of there's some like gory details, especially in the first book, and you're like, oh no, I shouldn't want to hear about this, like it should gross me out, but it's kind of really interesting. So yes, I love this series, and this was probably my least favorite of the series, which is a shame since it's the conclusion. However, I do recommend this series as a whole. I still love it and think people should read it, but yes, that's basically my thoughts. And because this is the third book of the series, I'm not really going to get into what it's about because so many things have happened. So I'm just gonna leave it up to you guys to check out the Goodreads link to The Madman's Daughter down below, or to check out my videos. Either one would be good. This is where I'm going to leave the non-spoilerly people. If you have read The Madman's Daughter, or A Cold Legacy, since that's the book I'm talking about. If you have read A Cold Legacy, stay tuned so we can discuss it. If not, I'll talk to you later. Yes, bye! So starting off this book, I knew that it was going to be about Frankenstein, but I've actually never read Frankenstein like all the other books in the series. I haven't read The Island of Dr. Moreau, I have not read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I have not also read Frankenstein, which I know what I'm doing next October, right? So I kind of didn't really know what was going to happen. Again, I knew it wasn't the best story, and I knew people died, so I was expecting that, but I never really was expecting anything much in general. The common theme of this book was Juliet and her father. Her father was dead, but her father still had an influence on Juliet. And so it's one of those things to where Juliet always was wondering, like, how do I get away from my father's influence, and do I follow in his footsteps? Do I follow my mother's? But throughout the book, I was just wondering, like, why does it have to be one or the other? Like, why can't you just be Juliet and make your own decisions and not worry about your father's or your mother's influence? It didn't really make sense to me, but just because of the theme of the story, I always knew that she would choose her father in the sense of the experimentation and bringing Edward back to life. Like, it wasn't a big surprise for me. It was expected. So because we have Frankenstein, I was expecting some character to be reanimated and brought back into life, and that was Hensley, who was super creepy. Like, from our first introduction of him with Juliet checking up on Edward through the keyhole, and then all of a sudden a white eye just right in the center of the keyhole. Like, that was kind of freaky. Also kind of reminded me of The Others, if you know the movie I'm talking about, with the girl with the puppeteer, and yeah, okay, sorry, tangent. On the one hand, I felt sorry for Hensley because he did still have this childlike mind, but at the same time, I was kind of like everyone was coddling him. He was just creepy and you never knew what to expect, and when Juliet kind of stopped coddling him, things happened, which I'll talk about later. I always knew that something was going to happen either during or right after Juliet's wedding, just because everyone was like, oh, it's not going to be as bad as Frankenstein's wedding and you'll be fine, and just because everyone kept on saying it, of course something was going to happen. Now, I wasn't expecting what happened to happen with Hensley. I mean, because during the wedding, Juliet told Hensley that he hurt the mice and yada yada yada, and then he kind of had a little hissy fit like children do. Also, kind of feel like Hensley was spoiled a lot because everyone's afraid of him, so he flipped out and kills Elizabeth and then burns them both, and wasn't expecting that, and it was sad, but I was kind of glad to see Hensley gone because he was a little And also, to be honest, I didn't really care that Elizabeth had gone. I never really grew to like her that much. I liked her more, I think, in the second book than I did in the third book. Maybe just because she wasn't as prevalent, or she wasn't as kind of motherly to Juliet. I don't know what the reason was, but I was just kind of like, okay, let's move on. So speaking of Lucy and Montgomery's wedding, in the second book, I started to have doubts about Juliet and Montgomery and Juliet and Edward, and I think if I remember correctly, said something along the lines of, I wish he just wouldn't end up with either of them. And I still honestly agree with that. In the third book, I just did not like Montgomery, and I just wish that maybe he would have died and her and Balthazar would have, I don't know, traveled the world together. I just did not like Montgomery at all. He had such a hard time accepting Juliet, even for her madness. Like, if he loves her, in my opinion, he knows what he's getting himself into with her madness. And to even like call out her on, like, there was one point in the book he's like, are you mad? And she knows how much of a sensitive topic that is, and that was such a slap in the face. I just felt like he just never understood and really wanted Juliet for who she was. I felt like he was always constantly trying to change her, especially with the whole, you don't have to be your father, you can be your mother, even though that also turned out not to be a good idea. And I also feel like there was this lack of trust between them in the series. You know, he kept secrets from her, and then she, when she was bringing Edward back to life, never told Montgomery because she was afraid how he would react. She was afraid of her madness. And so, which I never really considered madness, I kind of considered it being a decent human being and wanting people back. While flawed, you can't really fault her for wanting to bring back someone that she cared about and someone that her best friend Lucy loved. But you know, after all their dirty laundry is aired and they're like, oh, we're never gonna keep secrets from each other ever again. You've kept secrets for as long as you've known each other. How can you expect to trust one another, or to all of a sudden not tell, like, keep secrets? Like, I still feel like Juliet is still scared of Montgomery's opinion, and they just don't think that that's healthy. I don't. So in the end, the character that I did care the most about, I was kind of just getting really frustrated with all the characters except for Lucy, because Lucy I felt like was the only one who knew herself, who trusted herself and what she believed in, and then went after it. And I think that's an admirable trait in people. When she died, I was just like, oh, come on! Like, why? I kind of just wanted her father to, in the end, come with these men and just be like, I just want my daughter back, and to actually be sincere, because in my opinion it would have been a good juxtaposition between how evil Juliet's father was, and that not all father characters are kind of that way. I mean, you have Montgomery, whose father abandoned him. You have Juliet, whose father did vivisections and did all of his creepy experiments. I was kind of hoping that Radcliffe was actually sincere, but he wasn't, and he ended up shooting his daughter, which was crazy and sad, and I wish that Juliet and Edward could have just lived happily ever after. I kind of wished that Juliet would bring Lucy back to life so Lucy and Edward could live happily ever after for immortality until they started losing their minds, which 40-50 years from then. But didn't happen. And again, I also think that's part of Montgomery's influence because of the conversation they had earlier. I think if Montgomery hadn't really said anything, she would have done it without a hesitation, and she would have brought Lucy back. And I don't like Montgomery. Not only did Montgomery bother me, but Juliet bothered me in the sense that throughout the other two books, she had a conviction, and just like I said with Lucy, she had her beliefs, she thought that she knew what was right, and she did it. And then in this last book, all of a sudden she's questioning herself and making decisions that I just didn't really think that were her character. However, the good message that did come out of Lucy's death was the fact that she lived her life to the fullest. And I think Juliet says that when she decides not to bring Lucy back to life. So in the end, Edward goes and decides to leave for Antarctica and decides to spend his life there looking for, is it Igor or someone else who's like him? I don't remember, but he goes off in search for them to live in Antarctica, which isn't really a happy ending. I think I'd rather just die. And then in the ending, I felt like everything was just miraculously solved, and they were going to live all happily ever after, and Juliet says, you know, oh, I hope Edward gets everything that he's looking for, and Montgomery's like, oh, and did you? And she thinks about it, and she's like, oh, yes, I did. But did she really? Like, did she really? Just think about that. So I just kind of noticed that I spent a majority of this video talking about the things that I didn't like, and sometimes I think it's easier to talk about the things that you didn't like versus the things that you did. So I gave it 4 stars. I still liked it. I still love the series, even though this is probably my least favorite book in the series, and I think that's probably why I'm a little frustrated, just because I wanted it to be so good, and I felt a little disappointed. But on a good positive note, again, the writing was super good. I loved the twists and turns that happened that I didn't necessarily see, and I will pick up any other book that Meghan Shepard writes after this. But that is going to be it for today. If you agree, disagree, let me know down below in the About section so we can talk about it a little bit. So yes, that is going to be it for today. If you like my videos, you can subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Goodreads, Tumblr, and Twitter. And so until next time, bye! Where I read 18 books in January. I didn't have classes until the 16th, so I ended up reading 13 books in 15 days. So that's why I have 18 books.